start by giving a short talk, and then we will go into breakout rooms. And then Abhayanara is going to lead a meditation, and then I will conclude by chanting the last Vandana. I was quite nervous about starting this talk, especially following Padmavajra from last week. He's a very inspirational teacher. And I thought, how can you follow that? So I'm going to do what I always do, and that is just talk from my own experience, say how it is for me. And I've been reflecting today that this is the last, if you like, the last official session in the current series of talks and evenings. So we've got 2 more after this, one of which next week will be a practice evening, and I might say a little bit more about the last one later on. So I was just reflecting on what a great swathe of teachings we've had on Sangharakshita's system of practice. So I wanted to do several things this evening. I think one was to do what my brief was, which was to talk about spiritual rebirth, and the other was to bring in some of the subjects that we've covered since January. There's another reason for being hesitant about following Padmavajra, and that is that when I said that I would do a talk on spiritual rebirth, I wasn't actually very sure what I was going to say. And when I started to come and write my talk today, it took me a while before I realized what the problem was. And the problem with me talking about spiritual rebirth stems from my background. As some of you know, my background is very working class. I was brought up in a mining town in northeast Derbyshire. Life was very practical. There were no frills. What you did was you did the job that was in front of you. And life was very immediate. That's the word that came to mind. So when you get a talk by Padmavajra, which is inspirational, but it's also about aiming for something which may be far distant, something which you may not even have started work on yet. And when I came to preparing this talk, I realized that it's not something I find easy to talk about. So spiritual rebirth, I wasn't actually sure what it was. Padmavajra gave me a good idea, but I found that a lot of it was, if you like, beyond where I am at the moment. There was another problem, and that is my age. As I'm aging, I find I'm getting more picky, I'm getting more particular, particularly about words and phrases. When we came to do this series of sessions, 3 of the subjects I was very happy with. So I was really happy with receptivity and with integration and with positive emotion. It's like I understood what they were from my own experience. And I realized I didn't really want to know anything about spiritual death and spiritual rebirth, that I'd been avoiding them. So I think this is a problem with me and organizations, that organizations tend to use words and phrases and concepts which everyone knows and everyone accepts, or I think everyone accepts. But I am finding it increasingly difficult to accept some of the words and phrases, and spiritual death and spiritual rebirth were two of those. So I wondered what the resistance was. And it came about by talking to a friend that they have quite an abrupt feel about them. That birth and death in those two phrases, they're events which are quite, I don't know, cataclysmic or even violent, sudden, happening all at once. They are events. And that isn't how I saw spiritual death and spiritual rebirth. I couldn't actually connect with those descriptions. So when I realized that, the next bit of it, of course, was, well, okay, Jayaratna, if you're not going to have spiritual death and spiritual rebirth, what are you going to have to fill the gap? What are you going to go with? And thinking about it, the way I see those two parts of the system of practice is more in the nature of a process, not an event or events, but a process of change consistently over time. I tend to think of spiritual death in terms of us dropping off parts of ourselves. I know that's a very crude interpretation, but sometimes that's how it feels. We're expected just to drop away bits of ourselves. Bits of ourselves are going to die. And I don't know if I totally believe that. It's not how it feels. Nor does it feel right that I'm going to grow extra parts. I'm going to grow a third thumb or something of that type. It's not that there's anything new in that way about me. So I was trying to find some way of putting these ideas across this evening. I found it really difficult, to be honest. So I just hope that what I'm going to say makes some sort of a sense. So in my way of thinking, it's a gradual change. And then I began to think about change. Well, what is it that changes? I mean, we're changing all the time. If you take anything from the Buddha's teachings, it's that there is nothing but change. So in what way are we changing? And what it feels like to me is that what is changing is the direction of our energy and our effort. And that brought up another question. So in what way does the direction of our energy and effort change? How do we do that? And again, speaking for myself, how I experience that is that life presents me with an endless string or a series of choices. Yeah. So as I experience life, as I experience how I live my life, I have an endless series of choices. I can go move into the direction of satisfying my greed, of indulging in my aversion, or persisting in my delusion. So my energy can move in that direction. Or I can move the other way. I can move in the direction of generosity, in kindness, and hopefully towards being more wise. And the way that this feels is that I'm withdrawing energy from what is unskillful. So it doesn't always feel that the unskillful parts are falling away or dropping off. It feels that there's this process of a slow atrophy, a slow withering of those attitudes, of that way of being. And putting effort and energy into the more skillful ways of being brings about growth and blossoming. And that image occurred to me this week, being out in the garden and seeing the blossom on the trees that I'm looking at out of the window. That arises through warmth, the warmth of the sun, signaling, warming the trees and signaling that it's time to wake up, time to blossom and bloom. And I think there's a similar process goes on. A similar, if you think about rebirth in those terms, then I'm happier with that. But it often feels like a very slow process. I mean, if we look in the garden, the blossom comes out in a few days. My own process has been going on for 45 years now, and that's slow progress, but it's still progress. It's still change. So I'm happy with this idea of a process rather than spiritual death, spiritual rebirth. I know it's not presented like that, but that's the reaction, I'm afraid, that those phrases bring in me. I'd much rather think of them in terms of a process, in terms of this process of moving towards the skillful and away from the unskillful. And then I began to think, well, okay, what's helped me to do that? And the first thing that came to mind was mindfulness. Mindfulness and seeing clearly. And I've just started to read Vajradevi's book and really enjoying it. I find I can't read more than a few pages at a time. It's got a lot in it. So if anybody says, well, I'm not quite sure what about mindfulness, I would encourage you to buy the book. It's very good. And developing mindfulness, even to a small extent, means that I can start to apply the 4 right efforts, to become aware of skillful and unskillful actions and speech and thought. So any skillful actions that have arisen, I can recognize and develop. Any skillful actions that have not yet arisen, I'm aware of and I can begin to develop. And with the unskillful actions, if there are any that are there, I can acknowledge them and say, this is part of me. And then I've got a choice of, can I work on those or not? Those of you who have been with me when I've led meditations will remember that for the majority of the time that I lead meditations, it's the Metta Bhavana. And that's because I have a great belief and a great experience of the effect of developing kindliness. Kindness to self and kindness to others. And I think this has a great application to the process that I've been describing. If we're trying to change, if we're making efforts, sometimes we're disappointed. Sometimes we relapse. Sometimes we go back, or it feels like we're going back. And unless we're quite kind to ourselves, we can tend to get into blame. We can tend to think, oh, well, it's not much point in trying. And really, this is not being kind. This is being judgmental. There was some research done, many years ago, 20 years ago now, by 2 Americans, 2 Texans called Prochaska and Di Clemente, about relapse. Particularly, this was with smokers, but I think it applies to anything where you're trying and failing. And what they said was that relapse is part of change. It doesn't get in the way of change, it's actually part of changing. And what they said was that there's always something we can learn from relapse. If only we'll be kind to ourselves and say, I wonder what happened there. Yeah? So this idea of being kind to oneself can work really well in this process of change, in this trying to turn around. The impetus that we've developed before we started meditation of veering towards the unskillful, trying to turn that around and turn towards the skillful. Something that didn't occur to me until relatively recently, a quality in the spiritual life, is curiosity. I suppose I must have had curiosity, but I'd never identified it as something that helped. So asking the question, what else would help in this situation? What else can I try? So trial and error is something else, and not being too disappointed when something doesn't work. It may be that we're all individuals, we're all different. So it may be that we haven't yet found whatever it is that might work for me or for you. And so far, I've just talked about work we do on our own, the meditations we do, the practices we do, looking at the Dharma for ourselves. But of course, we're not alone in this. We have the Sangha. We have our spiritual friends. And if they are our spiritual friends, they will give us feedback. They will feed back to us. They will reflect back to us the changes they see. They will rejoice in our changes. They will rejoice in the process that they see us involved in. They'll acknowledge the effort we're making to become awake, to become the Buddha. And we can also give ourselves feedback. We can also see for ourselves that things are changing. The process is ongoing within us. So it may be that we have a realization that an idea we had about ourselves was erroneous, and that we're not as we thought we were. Or it could be that but I find this particularly with family, that if I haven't seen family for a while, or I haven't seen friends for a while, when I see them, I respond differently to them. When I see people I find difficult, it may be they're not quite as difficult. So perhaps I'm becoming a little more skillful. My speech is getting more skillful. My thoughts are getting more skillful, more kindly. So generally, I hope this has been useful. I hope it's been useful to actually share what I see as being my take on spiritual death and spiritual rebirth. I know I'm getting to be quite a grumpy old man, and I know some of some words and phrases that we use I find don't resonate with me in a very positive way. I hope I haven't been too negative about this, and that you gain some benefit from what I've been saying. So thank you for your attention. Looking at the next two sessions, next week, as I said earlier, will be a practice evening. And then something I talked about earlier this evening with Saravantu and with Akasha Raja was the possibility on the last evening of having a question and answer evening. So inviting people to, between now and then, you've got 2 weeks, to reflect on everything that we've talked about since the beginning of January. Think about all the evenings that you've had input. And are there any questions that you'd like to ask, either of specific order members or generally of the order? Anything that you feel you'd like an answer to, or you'd like clarified, or you disagree with. So it needn't be a question, it could be a statement. So the idea is to finish, to sort of put to rest anything that you feel needs putting to rest about what we've been doing in this past 3.5 months. It's been a really rich time, and we've covered a lot of ground. And it may be that for you, it feels as if we've sort of skimmed over something, and you feel you'd like it to be opened up a little bit. You feel you'd like a bit of blossoming, a bit of blooming of stuff. So Yeah, that's just a 2-week warning of that. Okay, Abhayanara, you ready to take it away?
Sorry, could I just do a quick advert as well? While
Yes,
we're at
quick
it?
advert. Sorry.
No problem. Which is for Ratnaguna. He's giving one of his monthly study sessions or sort of talk around the text on the 24th, Saturday, the 24th of April. And this is going to be on the Tibetan text. He's working through different genres. So this is a text by Milarepa, Shepherd's Search for Mind. 11 o'clock, Saturday the 24th.
And is it on? It's on Zoom link too. Is that right? Yeah.
Well, there's a specific link for it, yeah, which hopefully will be in a news flash, or you can use the same link from a previous newsletter. It's a tiny CC, something like Study with Ratnaguna, I think. Okay.
Thank you, Vajrapriya. Sounds like we need a news flash for that one. And thank you, Jayaratna. Can everyone hear me okay? Right, I get a thumbs up. Very good. So Jayaratna invited me to lead the meditation this evening, and I asked him, what would you like me to lead? And his first impulse was to go with the Metta Bhavana. But then he obviously reconsidered and thought, no, let's have a mindfulness of breathing. So in a way, we're going back to where we started in this session at the beginning of January. So I'm going to lead us in a mindfulness of breathing, but I'm going to do a very light lead, actually. I'm going to start with getting us embodied. So I'm going to lead us in a bit of a body scan. And I think I'm finding increasingly useful to become very embodied when I meditate. And actually, as we become more embodied, as we become more interested in the sensations in the body, our mental activity naturally dies away. So it's a very good preparation for meditation, particularly if we've got a very busy mind. If we've got a lot of mental activity going on, we can come into the body and we can allow that mental activity just to lighten, just to drop away. And we can really start to become absorbed in the body and in the breath. So that's what we're going to do this evening. So we've got about half an hour. So I'll spend a bit of time setting that up, leading us in a body scan, getting us embodied. And I think I'll probably just simply ring bells for the 4 stages of the Metta Bhavana. And I'll see how I'm feeling. I might end with a little poem. We'll see how we go. We'll probably do a little bit of just sitting at the end, and then a poem to finish off. And then I'll hand back to the beautiful chanting voice of Jayaratna to finish with the last Vandana, as has become tradition. So if you'd like to set yourselves up to meditate, get yourselves comfortable. You might want to lie down. You might want to sit on cushions in a chair. You might want to stand up. Whatever's comfortable. So just spending a little bit of time setting yourselves up. You might want to turn off your screen, whatever you want to do. And just maybe taking a few deep breaths and allowing yourself time to just arrive. Just arrive with yourself right here, right now. Allowing all the talking of the evening just to gently subside. And maybe with each out breath, just relaxing that little bit more. And becoming aware of our face, of any sensations in the face. the jaw, the mouth and lips, the nostrils, the sensations of the breath coming in and out of the nostrils. Of the eyes, and the eyebrows. The sensations of the forehead. We often carry tension in the forehead. Just allowing that to soften. Taking the awareness to the scalp, to the top of the head, the back of the head. And down the neck and the throat. The shoulders. Allowing the shoulders to gently fall away, just to drop. Taking the awareness down the arms, the elbows, the forearms and wrists. And the hands and the fingers. Lots of sensation in the fingers, in the tips. You might notice a warmth or a tingling. And taking awareness to the upper body, to the chest, the ribs, noticing the rise and fall of the ribs with the breath. And down to the lower body, the lower abdomen, softening the belly, becoming aware of the hips, of the pelvis, of the sitting bones, and their contact with the ground. Taking that awareness down the legs, the upper legs, thighs, the knees, the calves, and down to the shins and the feet, heels, the soles of the feet, perhaps in contact with the ground, and the toes. Having a sense of the whole body, being grounded in the earth, noticing the sensations of contact with the earth through the sitting bones, through the feet. And really allowing the earth to take your weight. Really letting go into the earth. Perhaps with each out breath, taking it right down through the body, down into the earth. As far as you can go. And on the in-breath, drawing that energy up, that prana, from the earth, up through the body, up the spine, the neck, to the top of the head, and beyond. Having a sense of that lift through the body, up to the vast, expansive blue sky. As we sit poised, alive, between the earth below and the sky above. And becoming aware of the breath. Of the sensations of the breath in the body as we breathe in and out. As we begin the mindfulness of breathing. And now simply let go. Let go of any effort you've been making in the practice. And for the last few minutes, just sitting. Sitting with whatever arises in your experience. The rain has stopped. The clouds have drifted away. And the weather is clear again. If your heart is pure, then all things in your world are pure. Abandon this fleeting world. Abandon yourself. Then the moon and flowers will guide you along the way.